join the tables respectively. Alors, comme mentionné, bien sûr, ceux qui sont arrivés en retard et qui ont des badges, on vous demande de rejoindre vos groupes respectifs et vos tables respectives. Et ceux qui sont arrivés et qui n'ont pas de badge, malheureusement, pas de souci, vous pouvez vous placer où vous le souhaitez. Let's start. Ladies and gentlemen, I do hope that you had a nice tea break. And now that the protocol is now over, we shall continue our workshop with a few key presentations. As you can see, on a en tout cas de nouveaux intervenants. Et nous allons commencer avec leur discours. The Ministry of Finance, Economic Planning and Development, and the Economic Development Board have decided to jointly organize this workshop on building resilience through SMEs and entrepreneurship, to discuss the different schemes and opportunities available already and to find better solutions for the future. As Dr. the Honorable Renganaden Padiechi mentioned earlier during his speech, SMEs are of crucial importance for the advancement of the country. Let's start with our first presentation of the day. He is currently the CEO of SME Mauritius and has spent a major part of his career at senior management positions in the private sector, both locally and abroad. His experience spans operations, marketing, logistics, strategy development, business restructuring, and international business, among many other skills. I would like to welcome on stage Mr. Rampersad, CEO of SME Mauritius Limited, for his presentation on supporting and mentoring SMEs. I kindly remind all our speakers today that they have a maximum of 8 minutes for their presentation. Sous vos applaudissements, bien sûr, mesdames et messieurs, Monsieur Rampersad.
Merci beaucoup. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, colleagues from support institutions and doing what we do best, namely supporting SMEs, good morning. I wish to have a very special word of thanks to the EDB and the Ministry of Finance for having organized this session in order to give us the opportunity to discuss problems that we may have been facing or issues that we may be having, and more importantly, how the schemes that are currently in place are helping SMEs in Mauritius. The resilience of an economy, as you would imagine, is the sum total, the aggregate of the resilience of its constituent parts. And SMEs being such an important part of our economy, it's quite normal that developing resilience in SMEs would definitely help in the resilience of the Mauritian economy. We have right now 5 major schemes that we introduced. In fact, it was developed just before the COVID period, but it became very handy going ahead after the COVID situation in order to help SMEs to breathe again and to reignite their operations. So the first one, we started with the Internal Capability Development Scheme, which looks at advisory support on any one activity of the value chain, operations and process engineering, productivity improvement, mentoring, hand-holding, barcodes, registration of trademarks, patents, intellectual property, and technical training. This scheme is specifically meant, as it rightly says, to be interventions along your value chain, starting with procurement, through to operations or manufacturing, logistics, inbound and outbound, marketing, sales, customer relationship, HR, finance, any one of those functions that make up your value chain. And it is meant to improve the internal resilience of SMEs. There are grants that are attached to it. There is a lot of work that is attached to it. And there is the administrative part before we come to the financing part. But what I can assure you that your files move quite quickly, and we usually take approximately 3 weeks to deliver on our promises. The second one is the Technology and Innovation Scheme. We have preceded some of our colleagues in establishing this, but I'm sure that going forward, this scheme will be one of the key constituents of the support that we give to SMEs. It is about improving two things: your visibility, or whatever you may be having as technology in order to support you in your production, in your manufacturing, in the offer of your services. We have the online visibility and social media integration and advertising, the development of mobile applications, website design, which was there before, and we have re-included it. The acquisition of new machinery and process improvement technologies, very important for right now in this present context, if you are to improve your competitive advantage, or if you are to gain in productivity. Accounting software, ERPs, anti-pollution, green and energy conservation, water treatment mechanisms. So this is the second major scheme that we're offering, and I can tell you that approximately 52% of all applications that we have received so far fall in this category. The next one is the SME Marketing and Support Scheme, testing for compliance by laboratories, online presence on international selling platform, eBay, Amazon, and you choose it, costs related to the development of e-catalogs. This one is very important. Administrative costs relating to export consignments and export documentation, because for those who are exporting in small quantities, those fixed costs represents a major part of what you gain as profits. So if SME Mauritius intervenes and reimburses that part, the SME is better off with regards to his profitability. We have export market prospection and market access activities that are not covered by the EDB. We have conferences, seminars, networking events, and training, if ever. And as soon as our borders open and you are able to travel, we will be pleased to listen from you about your plans and help you out there. And we have administrative costs, again, relating to factoring and leasing services. So those who are going for factoring, they have an administrative cost, let's call it, let's say, 12 to 15,000 related to each one of their factoring exercises, and we reimburse SMEs on those administrative costs. Again, in order to reduce the fixed costs that very often plumb your profitability when you are doing small consignments. The last one is inclusiveness and integration. We have spoken about it. The Minister of Finance and Honorable Bola also spoke about it. A very important part going ahead. Two things and two words that come out of it: integration and inclusiveness. In our model of development, in escalation of the way that we are going to escalate our SMEs, it is important that we integrate them. The smaller ones integrating into the medium ones, and the medium ones into the bigger ones. Yes, it is only a seeding capital, it's only the start of it, but what we want you to understand is that SME Mauritius strongly believes that going forward, it would be as important for you to collaborate as anything, because alone might be very often, you will not achieve economies of scale that you should be getting in order to remain competitive. Therefore, we have laid a lot of emphasis on integrating the operations of SMEs, and all SMEs that have an established business with another SME gets reimbursed up to a sum of 100,000 rupees. All this to encourage you to work together, to develop market strategies together. And the smaller ones, especially the 40,000 or so of SMEs, mainly the women and young people who today are feeding their families, who are a very important part of our SME landscape, who are not going to government for social support, but they are working very hard, feeding their families, getting their children educated. We want to be part of that, and we want to reward them for that. Therefore, integration and inclusiveness is a key project for us, and we are encouraging SMEs to move ahead together wherever possible. Of course, you will keep your individual entities for yourselves, but there are certain things that you can do together and you can do it better. So the last one, is the Utility Connection Assistance Scheme, mostly for agriculture. Very often what happens is that those who are going to agricultural products have a hefty quotation from CB or CWA to connect themselves with the mains or the electricity supplies. Therefore, SME Mauritius happily joins in to give you help up to 150,000 rupees in order for you to get yourself connected with utilities and mains. So these are the 5 schemes. What is most important, and before I finish, I'll take only one more minute. It's true that I presented it as one scheme after the other, but the way you have to read it is as a continuum. It is a replication of your value chain, which starts with internal capabilities, moves to the market, and moves to support. And the support part comes from technology. Therefore, our schemes is really a menu. It is a menu that unfurls vertically. You can choose vertically, whatever you want to choose, and you can choose horizontally across the schemes. Why did we do it like that? It's because it would have been extremely difficult for us to come to the majority of SMEs over here and the numbers that you have outside and assess their individual cases. And there is no one size fits all. If we want to be effective, if we want to be efficient in the application of the resources that are given to us, we have to ensure that we apply it efficiently. And one way of doing it is to allow you to choose from the menu, vertically and horizontally, what best suits your requirements with the help of officers of SME Mauritius. And from there, we move to providing the solutions. This allows us to tap a larger number. This allows us to bring more fairness. It allows us to customize our products to the needs of SMEs. This is by and large my presentation on the schemes. I hope not only you and representatives of SMEs over here take the message and carry it to other SMEs. And this is the part that we wish to play in the building of sustainability in SMEs and in the SME sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Rambassad, CEO of SME Mauritius Limited, who discussed about supporting and mentoring SMEs. Let's proceed with our second speaker of the day for his presentation. He joined the Development Bank of Mauritius Limited on the 20th April 2020 as Managing Director after a successful career spanning some 37 years at the Bank of Mauritius, the central bank of the country. Mr. Jaiwan Pandu has also co-authored a paper of the Bank of International Settlements on strategic asset allocation for the management of foreign exchange reserves by central banks, among, of course, many other things that he has been doing throughout his life. Let's continue with an overview of support schemes by the DBM, and I now invite Mr. Pandu, Managing Director of the DBM, on stage for his presentation. Sous vos applaudissements toujours, mesdames et messieurs.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for having us here today. In fact, I would like to again myself also thank the ADB, this laudable event, in order to give us the opportunity to share in terms of the schemes that are available. There could be, we have been trying to disseminate as far as information as we can, but I think this is a very laudable event. So as mentioned earlier by many of the speakers, following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic and the severe negative impact looming on the domestic economy, and emphasizing on the need to mobilize and provide adequate funding for targeted intervention, the government came forward with a series of measures aimed at mitigating the harmful effects and reviving the economy. In this respect, the Development Bank of Mauritius was called upon to provide financing to enterprises that were affected by the pandemic. And in this context, a series of schemes have been introduced, which targets basically SMEs, among others, cooperative societies, but in all the sectors of the economy, on which I will elaborate shortly. But before that, I think it would be proper for me to present a small snapshot on the evolution of the DBM over the years. So basically, what is the objective of the DBM? It's an economic vocation focusing on policies by way of assisting the government in achieving its economic and social objectives. How do we achieve it? There are two ways. First of all, in providing term deposits, term financing, that is loans, but the other aspect through which we provide assistance to SMEs is through this provision of industrial space. In fact, the DBM has been acquiring, as had already mentioned earlier by the ministers, in terms of acquiring spaces to provide to SMEs. And where I take this opportunity to inform members, people, that the SME park of Plain Mania has already been allocated to the contractor. So we have nearly 364 days for them to deliver on that project. And as regards the Plain Mania one, the one at Villemay, that's we are already now finalizing the documents. But on top of that, it's not only for Mauritius, but also in Rodrigue, where we are having a techno park at Balajiru. And for that also, we are right now in the process of analyzing the bid that we have received. So as mentioned earlier, just to give you a snapshot of DBM, so it has been 32 years since DBM has been here. So these are the milestone of DBM over the years. So at the core of it is the serving of the MSME community in shaping Mauritius. So as mentioned earlier, in terms of the areas of financing, so these are the areas where we have been financing. So you name it, you have it, the sector, agriculture, transport, hotel, leisure, trade, manufacturing, IT, renewable energy, and fishing. So basically, the DBM is financing basically all the sectors of the economy and all the players. And as mentioned earlier, we had this pandemic, and government, together with DBM, we came forward with a series of schemes. So as mentioned earlier, what have we been doing for DBM to provide assistance to these entities? And that was a plan de soutien, because that was a quick fix in terms of working capital and so on. So we have a working capital loan scheme. At the same time, as mentioned earlier, the Bank of Mauritius having given guidelines to commercial banks to extend or reschedule loans, DBM again played that role as well. We have been giving reschedulement to SMEs. In terms of the rental of SMEs, we have been giving partial waiver of 50% for 2 months. There has also been postponement and deferral of rental dues over for the next month. And the last one is that we have agreed that in terms of the agreement that there are with all the entities that rent the premises of the DBM, there is an increase every year when there is renewal. But this time, because of the pandemic and seeing that the cash flows of entities are being affected, we have decided that the rate will be freezed for 1 year. So there won't be any increase in these rentals. So as I mentioned earlier, just to go quickly over it, in terms of the capital loan scheme, the objective was, as mentioned earlier, provision of short-term working capital. That's basically the idea was to provide a working capital for them to improve their cash flows. And that's where the maximum amount is 1 million with an interest rate of 1.5%. And you have a moratorium up to end of December so that you don't pay any capital. Repayment starts only as from January 2021. So here it is in a snapshot in terms of the loans that we have provided as of now. It's nearly 200 million rupees that we have already been disbursed to SMEs, individuals who have contracted loans from the TBM. This is mainly for the working capital. So as you can see, it is all these sectors are included. There is another one that we have, is a major one, is in terms of the wage support scheme. Government was providing wage assistance to entities to pay the salary, but then as from June, they were paying only for hotel sector because the other companies started operation, whereas the borders remains closed. So we had a request received from export-oriented companies to help them. And that's where we came forward with a loan scheme, which is at 2%. Again, it's applicable, sorry. Okay, so wage support scheme is applicable to export-oriented goods services companies. In fact, as of today, we have already received 37 applications, which we have approved. And the bulk of it, nearly out of the 37, nearly 32 are small companies employing some 200 or 300 employees. But the total of the schemes that we have provided help is more than 10,000 employees, which means that we have assisted enterprises, companies to pay the salary of their employees until end of December, and including their bonus. So all those 10,000 employees will be receiving as if their salary, because we have been providing this line of credit at the disposal of those entities. And those entities, again, that also is at 2%, but again, we have a moratorium up to end of December. Now, before coming to this one, I would also like to highlight that in the budget speech, government came up with a series of measures, and right now we have nearly 9 schemes that is implemented in the budget, all targeted at enterprises. And in that scope, we have also that distressed companies. Now, this is a major one which we are going to finance. In fact, we have to make a difference between the plan de soutien, that was the COVID, and this one. Because in terms of the plan de soutien, the COVID, we were only financing as if cash flow 4 main items: salaries, utilities, and so on. But this one, this is basically when we see that the company is in a situation where it will be difficult for them to get a financing in the short term and to come up. That's where the scheme comes, is a distressed one, where we are going to accompany those companies. And the basic idea here is to accompany those companies. It's not just to give them the financing, but also to accompany them. Now, to accompany them, the scheme here is going to be for a longer period. It can be up to 7 years or even 9 years, but that depends on the projects. And here, all the distressed companies that have been affected by the COVID should come forward with a plan, because we don't just want them to give the money and then we don't see visibility. So here, it's important that the SMEs that approach the DBM should come forward with a plan how they intend to do the turnaround. And this is important. And in that scheme also, we are also going to have mentors that will be attached with those entities that we are going to finance. But for that also, there is also provision that these entities should have a certificate that will be issued by the ISP. And even then we'll have independent financial analysts that will be associated with them. But the fees of the report or even for the IFA will be borne by the bank. And here I must think it will be the SME Mauritius and the ministry that will be paying those fees. Just to say that the enterprises that are going to apply for this will not pay for those fees, but that will be something that will be within the agreement for them, because we need that IFA to accompany them, because we don't want to give financing and then there is no follow-up. And that's the major impact which this distress scheme is going to have. So this is a scheme which is going to have the game change, but it should be also accompanied and well structured. So just to few minutes elaborate on what is also was the taxi and so on, but the message is here. You will have it on the presentation and it is available on the site of the DBM. But safe to say that the major one that is coming is a distress, where I think those entities who feel that the COVID-19 has not helped them in terms of the working capital, the distressed one should be the one that should be able to help them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pandu, MD of DBM, for your presentation and an overview of support schemes. Je sais que c'est difficile aussi, vous avez beaucoup de choses à dire, donc difficile de respecter les quelques minutes. Et donc, merci en tout cas pour cette présentation. The presentation on schemes and opportunities are not over yet. Our next speaker, Mr. Suryadev Bidesi, has over 40 years of experience in the financial and banking environment, having occupied senior positions. For the past decade, he has been closely involved in setting up budget-related financial schemes to assist SMEs and local companies, amongst others. He occupied the post of CEO at Sme Equity Fund Limited before joining the Investment Support Program, ISP Limited. Mr. Bidesi, Chief Operating Officer of ISP Limited, please come forward for your presentation on equity participation for SMEs.
Thank you, first of all, to the Ministry of Finance and the Economic Development Board for just this wonderful gathering. Let's hope that what we've been able to, we are going to share with you will be of help. Thank you, MC, for the good words. I'll start straight away. I've got very few minutes, but I have got 4 institutions on which to talk about. The first one is the Guichet Unique. So before I talk on this Guichet Unique, let me just give an overview. On the 23rd of March, when there was a COVID pandemic, 4 institutions came together. There was the ISP, the SIC, State Investment Corporation, the DBM, and the Sme Equity Fund. We create one cell. And that cell was to receive all applications and try to screen and share it with the 4 institutions. Then it was called the Plan de Soutien. Afterwards, after the budget, in August 2020, it changed, the role of Plan de Soutien has changed to Plan de Relance into Plan de Soutien. This has been, you've heard about the Plan de Soutien. And now, the Guichet Unique receives any application, whether by phone or by email. When they receive the application, what they do, they just screen it and share it with the relative institutions. You'll see on the screen there what has been the purpose of creation of the scheme, of the Guichet Unique. So, first of all, they give an overview, they share the information, they pass it over to the relative institutions. Not only that, they also monitor whether those who are applied are getting satisfaction with it, with the schemes and so on. And of course, if there are complaints, they register complaints and try to find solutions for that. This is the Guichet Unique, and it's situated in the office of the Ministry of Finance, and also it has all the institutions that you'll find on the screen that are involved with the Guichet Unique. You've got, namely, the development of Mauritius, of course. You've got the Bank of Mauritius. As you are aware, the Bank of Mauritius also had released 9.3 billion rupees to commercial banks to allow banks to assist enterprises having suffered under COVID. You've got the investment support program on which we are going to give some more details. You've got the SIC, you've got the SME Equity Fund, you got SME Mauritius, who is here also, and you've got EDB and the MRA. Now, we've already spoken about the plan de soutien and plan de relance. Some statistics, I think the minister already given you some statistics on what has been dispersed as a date, have been approved and dispersed on the plan de soutien and plan de relance. So the figures are there. I'll go very quickly over it. And now, also, as you are aware, financial support is one thing, but there should also be the non-financial support. There are two institutions that are very closely associated with non-financial support. You've got the, of course, SME Mauritius. My colleague Ravin has already spoken about the non-financial support. You also have other institutions giving some non-financial support. So I'll go very quickly over it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if ever you have to write or to connect with the Guichet Unique, you've got on the screen the address of the Guichet Unique at the Ministry of Finance. So this is very briefly on what is the function, what are the roles and functions of the Guichet Unique. Now I'll speak on the three institutions which give financial support to enterprises. I must thank SME Mauritius, SME Equity Fund. Mr. Vedo Kalu is here. He has given me the permission to speak on his behalf. I thank also the State Investment Corporations who have given me the permission to speak on their behalf because of question of time. So I'll go straight on the three institutions and what they do. So let's start with the State Investment Corporation. As you are aware, the State Investment Corporation was founded in 1984. The object was, it was the investment arm of the government of Mauritius. And the purpose of the investment arm was to receive applications, to invest in companies, as you find that, to contribute to the economic growth of the country, to be a key player on strategic sectors by investing in strategic sectors, to promote funds for resilience of companies and high growth companies, and also to assist in the COVID. They have played a very important role during the COVID time. We'll speak about it later on. But then you must also know that the company started very, very small capital. Today, the asset value of the company has gone beyond 7.5 billion rupees within a diversified portfolio. You just name the portfolio investment. They've got a very diversified portfolio investment. Now, you'll find there how they've contributed to the economy of the country. So you'll find it there. So first of all, for the COVID support, they have been providing cash flow to companies. I'll come on that later on. They also bring equity investment to capital restructuring of companies. They encourage diversification, as mentioned. They go into various diverse sectors of the economy: construction, agro-industry, manufacturing, export enterprises, pharmaceutical, bioeconomy, you name it. And but one thing that they don't do, they don't refinance debt. Whenever there's a new investment, the SIC is here to help, but they don't buy the debts of other existing companies or buy debts of banks. Now, what are the features and mode of participation? First of all, they are not going to be a majority partner of your company. They'll always be a minority partner because the business is yours, right? Whenever they invest to help enterprises to grow, but they don't participate as a majority shareholder. This is very important for you to understand. Also, it all depends on the nature and amount of investment. They ask for a board directorship. And why board directorship? It's important because at least they have invested. They want to know how the board functions, what is happening at level of strategic decision that the board is taking. They have a disbursement plan. You know, if the company wants some funding, right? what you do, you have to ask for the fund, and when it's approved, the disbursement is made by phases according to what is required to invest and how it's going to be invested, so that the money goes in the right hands and for the right investment. Of course, they exist over a period of 5 years, because the SIC is not here to become a lifelong partner of the company. They have an exit route, there are conditions for exit, they have a shareholders agreement that they sign, and in the shareholder agreement, the terms and conditions are imposed for the exit route for them. Now, we've spoken about the 9.3 billion rupees has been put at the disposal of banks, commercial banks. And as you are aware, the SIC guarantees part of the funding provided by commercial banks under the COVID. If a company has been affected COVID and they want a working capital loan, banks agree to give out of the 9.5 billion rupees, SIC guarantees 60% of it for SMEs, that is for enterprises, less than 50 million rupees of turnover. Sorry, 60%, yes. And for 50% for those who are above 50 million rupees. So the very important measure that has been taken by government and which the SIT has been implementing for you. So now I'll speak on the Sme Equity Fund. The Sme Equity Fund is also another partner of government, and it's a private sector and public sector joint venture. You'll find it here. So 56% of the funding of the equity financing has been provided by the government, and 44% by commercial banks. What is the role of Sme Equity Fund? So you've got the objectives of Sme Equity Fund on the screen. You'll find it. The first one is very important. You'll find they assist in sustainable growth and expansion of enterprises. So for SMEs, it's very important. At times, when you go to your banks, the banks might give you funding, might give you a loan, might also not give you a loan. But if you come to the Sme Equity Fund and they look at your project, the project is acceptable to the Sme Equity Fund, so they will approve it and they become a partner to you to help you in your development. They also, it's one passionate role of Sme Equity Fund. They don't only participate with you as an equity partner by providing finance. They also have monitoring. And while monitoring, they also help you, guide you in your corporate governance, and guide you in terms of managing your company in the best interest of both yourself and as Sme Equity as a partner. So it's there to help you to instill corporate governance, to help you in managing your company better. And also, I've also spoken, a very important aspect is the deleveraging. Deleveraging is what, in fact? If you go for a bank, you take a loan. The more loan you take, the more you have to, what we call, your gearing becomes high. But when you invest, when SME invest in your company, you deleverage. Deleverage means you have the percentage of loans get lower so that you have the ability to take more loan if ever there's need to get more loan. So this deleveraging lowers down the gearing of your company, and therefore, of course, you have higher possibility to get further funding from banks. Now, these are the projects type that have been funded by Sme Equity Fund. So there's quite a lots of businesses that they've done. So they have invested in several types of projects, but one thing they don't do, again, just as SIC, they don't buy the debts of other companies. That is important. The second thing that they don't do, if you have got an unstructured organization, you have got a company, but you're not unstructured, you have no governance issues, you have not a good management team and so on, they won't be able to invest. So it's very important to have for you, for Sme Equity Fund to participate, to have a structured organization. Then these are the criteria. You have it in the schedule. And the last one, they invest from 500,000 to 25 million rupees. Now I'll speak very quickly on investment support program. So there are three measures for the investment support program. The first one is provide financial support to SMEs and MMEs through commercial banks to assist in the modernization. And these are the schemes that you have. So there's a list of schemes. Unfortunately, time is a constraint, so I won't be able to give you more details, but these are schemes that you have. And the investment support program is found actually in the same building as the SME Mauritius. You can come and contact us. So all these schemes are available for you to, you can take, of course, advantage of these. You've got the SME factoring scheme, which is also very important. The minister talk about the factoring scheme. Exporting, SME exporting can get financing under export factoring scheme. And these are the contact details. So I'm sorry to be very fast on the 4 schemes because it's quite difficult. Anyway, you can contact me later on. We can talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. BDC, Chief Operating Officer of ISP Limited, for your presentation on equity participation for SMEs. Bien sûr, le temps fait défaut, mesdames et messieurs, mais nos intervenants vont rester, je l'imagine, pour le déjeuner. Donc, si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à venir à leur rencontre et à contacter, bien sûr, les institutions respectives pour avoir plus de détails. Our last but not least presentation will be on opportunities in sustainable economic parks. Our speaker, Mr. Yash Manik, has been at the helm of a Mauritius Africa Fund since 2015. Under his stewardship, MAF is currently developing 5 sustainable economic parks under a government-to-government framework. The fund is also pursuing innovative financial solutions for the benefit of Mauritian enterprises. For example, through a partnership with MAF, Fonds de Solidarité Africain is offering attractive financing to Mauritian enterprises investing in African countries. I kindly invite Mr. Manik, Chief Executive Officer of the MAF, for his speech. Sous vos applaudissements toujours.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's the middle of lunchtime, so I'm not going to take too much of your time. But very quickly, I'm not going to be talking too much about schemes, but more about the Africa strategy of Mauritius, part of a policy orientation of Mauritius, and the comprehensive program that comes along with it. Okay, so the presentation is about sustainable economic parks that the government of Mauritius, through the Mauritius Africa Fund, is developing in African countries, in 5 African countries. A lot of studies have been done on business opportunities in Africa. And just in line is the Harvard Business Review that says that Africa is the world's next great manufacturing center. And obviously there are quite a few things going for Africa in terms of demographic boom, in terms of growth prospects for business, in terms of the doing business environment, which is becoming better and better with time, in terms of the business potential in Africa, and in terms of the return of investment that is available for enterprises in Africa. And in all 5 criteria, we noticed that Africa is ticking the right boxes and indeed making a lot of progress upwards. So it is important to be able to harness that potential. It is important to be able to identify the growth sectors and to act on the growth sectors that are there for the next few years. And as we can see in terms of forecast, there are quite a few high growth sectors in Africa. And in terms of B2B spending, quite a lot of spending projected for the next 10 years. So the government of Mauritius had put in place the Mauritius Africa Fund. It's also empowered the Economic Development Board and other institutions to work in tandem so as to be able to make the most of the opportunities in Africa. And some of the key aspects of the action of Mauritius has to do with going beyond diplomacy in order to be able to work much more closely with African countries. It has to do with experience sharing. Mauritius has some experience in terms of development, but at the same time, it is looking for new experience to be able to go through the next phase of its own development. It has to do with investment attraction. And with investment attraction, we talk about mobilizing the financial and non-financial sectors in Mauritius, the international financial center, the offshore sector of Mauritius, and at the same time, the international investment community to be able to mobilize financing, channel financing through Mauritius and onwards onto Africa. And at the same time, to be able to offer opportunities for growth for the Mauritian industry and its labor force. So the Sustainable Economic Park program that Mauritius Africa Fund is undertaking aims first and foremost to de-risk investment into Africa. And in investment, there are four key areas of action that we tend to focus on. The first and probably the most important one has to do with working under a government-to-government framework. And through a government-to-government framework, we are able to work very closely with foreign institutions, the institutions in the host country. We're able to put in place the necessary infrastructure and regulation so as to make sure that all the investments that we're channeling into these countries are adequately secure. We also we also focus quite a bit on building the necessary business environment, both in terms of physical infrastructure and in terms of non-physical or soft infrastructure that is required for business to operate. The third element is being able to rally international support. Support from institutions such as the World Bank, the IMF, the African Development Bank, and so on, regionally, but at the same time internationally, so that together there's a corpus of concerted action being undertaken worldwide for the benefit of the sustainable economic parks. And finally, probably key from the business side is access to resources and access to markets that we focus a lot into. And the goals of these special economic parks are, first of all, to expand the economic space for Mauritius. And this is crucial because Mauritius being what it is and its constraints in terms of population, size, and so on, it is imperative for us to be able to find new opportunities for growth in less crowded marketplaces. And we feel that Africa is the closest untapped market, let's put it that way, that is available for Mauritian enterprises. It is also important to create the necessary physical environment accompanied by the soft infrastructure so that the businesses can move out of Mauritius, internationalize in the proper way, and are able to operate in an environment which is conducive to them growing. It is, I think, also very important to promote access to markets. There is access to market from Mauritius through exports, but there are also a number of untapped regional markets that are more easily accessible if production is being done closer to them. Obviously, the free trade agreement on the African continent will come into play very soon, and that offers a lot of opportunities, but at the same time, it will bring in a lot of challenges for export from Mauritius, pending appropriate policy measures. So producing closer to resources, producing closer to market may be one of the keys for businesses to be able to grow. Now, when we facilitate the internationalization of companies from Mauritius, there are a lot of benefits that accrue from this move in terms of transfer of technology, of know-how, and of capacity. Constraints having to do with limited market size obviously do not incentivize companies to invest very heavily in technology and in upskilling. But with access to wider markets, the costs of technology incorporation, in capacity building, and in know-how are much more easily amortized. At the same time, I think if we have to be competitive, we need to be able to integrate ourselves in global supply chains, global value chains, leverage lower cost of production in certain countries, be closer to sources of raw materials so that business can be sustained. Another key point is to accelerate the financial and non-financial integration of Mauritius with mainland Africa. I mean, some of the challenges that are faced nowadays have to do, for instance, with banking charges and the difficulties of conducting business across borders. And one of the ways of bridging those gaps is for certain Mauritian enterprises to be able to operate there, and some Mauritian enterprises from Mauritius building linkages between themselves in order to further the business community. And that brings me to my last point, having to do with consolidating the existing linkages between companies operating in Mauritius and companies operating abroad. And the whole idea is to put in place the new ecosystem to facilitate the internationalization of Mauritian enterprises, with the hope that right now we have some companies that are able to operate regionally, but in time, through these measures, that the companies in Mauritius that are not yet existing will be born as global enterprises, which are much wider outlook. So if you allow me 2 minutes, I'll just rush through the parks that we're developing with two examples. Right now, like I mentioned, we have five parks under development in Senegal, in Ghana, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Kenya, and in Madagascar. And these offer various opportunities for investment at this stage, at development stage, for real estate developers, for institutional investors, and for utility partners. But in time, it will also offer a lot of opportunities for industry operators, some more established companies, but at the same time, opportunities for SMEs like yourself to be able to seize the opportunities in these locations. Two quick examples. In Senegal, probably the more mature project that we have, it's an industrial park located in Diamniadio, ideally located in between the port and the new airport, and bang in the middle of the new emerging city of Diamniadio. Being developed in two phases. Phase one, which is already operational and on which we communicated quite extensively a couple of years ago. 12 hectares under operation, 100% occupied right now with international companies. But phase two on 40 hectares, on which we will start development probably by the end of this year, otherwise early next year, pending the COVID situation. And a visual of the park just before inauguration, and some companies that are already operating in the park. And like I talked about, when I talked about de-risking, these are the kind of measures that we put in place, working very closely with the institutions in Senegal to put in the necessary regulatory environment for companies in terms of fiscal incentives, in terms of one-stop shop services to be able to accompany companies, international companies that are betting into the zone, in terms of utilities and the pricing of the utilities, in terms of the necessary infrastructure, and so on. A whole host of facilitation that are captured in the law that we have had put in place in Senegal. A market access, I'll just brush over it. In addition to what Mauritius offers, these locations have access to markets under AGOA, under preferential treatment with European Union, the international market, obviously, with the Silk Route with China, ties with India, regional markets that are there, and domestic markets in the case of Senegal, which is one of the booming, fastest growing domestic markets in Africa. Phase two, which will be a cluster of clusters, so that a lot of companies can be able to avail of the opportunities there, but at the same time to create the necessary critical mass for different companies and accompanying services to be able to be based in the zone. And Madagascar, closer to home, in which we're developing Textile City. Already, I think we have we have about 30 to 35% of the textile companies already operating in Madagascar are of Mauritian origin. So there's a very strong business case for the government to focus on the provision of facilities for the textile for operators in the textile sector, and this is one of our priority projects for the foreseeable future. The policy considerations are very clear. It has to do with the regional development agenda, linking Mauritius to Madagascar in the furtherance of the textile, for the development of the textile sector in the region. It has to do with development and industrial economics for obvious reasons. And it also has to do with trade and internationalization policies. And on this point, I'd like to add something from experience, what we have noticed in Madagascar. One of the biggest items of trade between Mauritius and Madagascar is textile. And one of the reasons why it is textile is because Mauritian companies are trading between themselves. CMT in Mauritius, for instance, is supplying CMT in Madagascar with raw materials from Mauritius. So these kinds of linkages between Mauritius and the SEZs that SCPs and SEZs that we're developing, I think hold a lot of potential for the export of products from Mauritius. So that I think I'll just skip through and wrap up here. I'll be available if you have any questions. Just on a closing note, with regards to the especially to the sustainable economic parks, we have been focusing on the development of the infrastructure, and now we are starting to work on the support policies. And some of the support policies will have to do with the financing side, so providing financial support to SMEs and enterprises in general in Mauritius. Some of the support policies will have to do with the non-financial and technical aspects of internationalizing companies from Mauritius. And a lot of the support will be on the ground so that companies, when they decide to move to these SCPs, they will have the necessary handholding and accompaniment to be able to settle down and conduct operations. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Manik, Chief Executive Officer of the MAF, for your presentation on opportunities in sustainable economic parks. Ladies and gentlemen, I do hope that these presentations have been instructive to all of you today. As we mentioned, of course, our speakers will be available during lunch, or you can contact as well each and respective institutions to have more details and to answer all your eventual questions. We are more than 150 in this room from different sectors with different views and visions and different point of views. And I know that the upcoming roundtable sessions will be fruitful ones. You have been, I know, sitting for a long time now, donc pause bien méritée, mesdames et messieurs, and you must be hungry. I have the pleasure to announce that lunch is now open. An amazing finger buffet is at your disposal for a few minutes outside this room, of course, and I wish you all a bon appétit. I just have a small announcement for all those sitting at the back. I kindly request you all to take your personal belongings with you during lunch, as we are going to do a different setup in the conference room meanwhile. Thank you so much, et je vous souhaite à tous un bon appétit.